How many of you have ever played hide and seek? Most of you have, right? So of course we all know it's a game of skill, seeing how artfully you can find a place to hide yourself. It's a game of patience, seeing how long you can wait in a hiding spot. It's a game of risk, thinking maybe it's time to find a new spot, so you try to circumnavigate the person seeking and find a new place to hide. And it's a game of endurance, where you see if you can outlast the seeker, and eventually the seeker will give up. And so when the seeker counts to a specified number, the search begins and the game is afoot. Now, Wednesday night, in our discussion, we talked about whether you would rather be a hider or a seeker. Who here would rather be a hider? All right. Why would you want to be a hider? What's a good reason for being a hider? No one. It's safer. All right. We got Hank.
I just think that I would want to be a hider because it would be easier for me, and I would just move to other places because they might be looking for you.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's a little safer. Who wants to be a seeker? Who wants to be a seeker? Why do we want to be a seeker?
It's fun to look.
Yeah. It's fun to look. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Joel. Yeah, so there's a challenge. So both sides are there's some fun and an adventure in both sides. Now, maybe you remember as a parent playing hide and seek with your kids, it's a little different, right? So when it's your turn to hide, you try to find a place that's obvious, like under the table, right? But your kids, they circle the entire house trying to find you. They can't find you anywhere. Eventually you're like trying to draw their attention. They still are like, where are they, right? And then eventually you have to be like, under the table. And finally they come, they see you there, and they're like so proud of themselves. And then it's their turn to hide. And it couldn't make it any easier on you, right? You walk into the living room and you see on the sofa a blanket with a young human figure underneath with legs sticking out of the end, and you're thinking, man, this is terrible. You could be like, I found you. It's like the most terrible place to hide. But you don't do that. You're like, wow, where could she be? Maybe she's under the coffee table, or maybe she's behind the TV. I have no idea. Maybe I'll just sit down on the sofa and try to find her. Wow, this is a lumpy sofa. And they're all surprised. Like, well, you found me. I can't believe you found me. It's pretty crazy. Now, today we're continuing our study through Psalm 139, and we're going to see how we are going to continually playing this game of hide and seek with God. And today we will discover that when as we continue to hide, that God is always out there seeking us. As we talked about last week, that Psalm 139 is broken into 4 stanzas, each 6 verses long. And last week we looked at the first stanza, which talks about how God is omniscient. He's all-knowing. He knows everything. And today we're going to look at the second and third stanzas. The second stanza talks about how God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. He's all present. And the third stanza talks about how God is omnipotent. He's all-powerful creator. And then next week, we're going to look at the fourth stanza, which talks about how God is all-judging, all-powerful judge. And the word I created was omni-judicial. And as we look at this poem, it's one of those songs that people love. And this, one commentator says that this is a poem that is not only one of the chief glories of the Psalter, but in its religious insight and devotional warmth, it is conspicuous among the great passages of the Old Testament. As a psalm, it is difficult to clarify. While it has some qualities of a hymn and some of a psalm of trust, but perhaps it's best considered a personal prayer. So we're going to be looking into this personal prayer, this prayer that we cry out to God and ask God to to reveal himself in the psalm and in our lives. And the second stanza begins with this. It begins, where can I go from your presence or from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? The first stanza was all talking about God's knowledge and how much he knows us. Now it shifts to God's presence with the psalm. So the omniscient, all-knowing God now is the omnipresent God. And the psalmist becomes overwhelmed with the ever-present nature of the Creator. And he begins to consider going on this game of hide and seek with God, considering what would be the ideal places to hide from God. Maybe under the bed or behind the couch, up in a tree, in an old refrigerator. Is there a good place that he can hide from God, that God will never find him? Is there a place that God would never even look? Or if maybe perhaps there's a way that if he hides well enough, that God will stop looking for him. And so he begins to offer some suggestions in this psalm. He says, if I go up to the heavens, or if I make my bed in the depths, or if I rise on the wings of the dawn, or if I settle on the far side of the sea, surely the darkness will hide me. One of these places has to be an ideal place to hide from God. So what about the heavens? Let's try to hide right under God's nose. Maybe the most obvious place. Maybe with God's people, we can just hide amongst them and we'll get lost in the shuffle. God won't even be looking for us. He'll be out there busy looking in the clever places, and he won't find us right here next to him. Or perhaps we should try the depths. All right? The depths. Go to the places we don't think God would ever be. Those places that we would never expect to find God. The NIV translates this depth, but other translations call it Sheol. This is a Hebrew word, and it means the abode of the dead, the disembodied state, a region of shadow and silence and forgetting, a dark and gloomy place where the inhabitants pass from conscious but dull, inactive existence, a place where the souls of people go that have no distinction. It's a place where contact with God and the living are severed. Surely this place, this Sheol, would be a place where God would never find us. And so we plummet ourselves into these depths. We hide in the unholy places, the bars and brothels, and the prisons and places of pagan ritual. But is it any surprise that these are the places where people are finding God and God is finding them, that when they hit rock bottom, they discover the rock that is higher than I. And so we think, okay, what about the wings of the dawn? If I go to where the sun rises, to where the horizon fades away, this would be to the furthest east. If I go to the furthest east, to the extreme place out there, maybe that's out of God's reach. Or if I go to the far side of the sea. And the ancient Jews, they considered the sea was always to the west for some reason. And they but also within the sea, that's where chaos and disorder would come out of. So they thought maybe if we go to the farthest west, to the distant land of chaos, that God would not find them. So they go to these extremes. They travel to the east or to the west to escape God's presence. But the psalmist figures out that there's nowhere that they can go. In fact, it says that if the Lord is present in the farthest extremes, it implies that he is in all places, that he is present in all places in between, that there's nowhere to hide from God. You can't go to the extremes or anywhere in between, that God is there. And so the psalmist suggests a last-ditch effort. One more hiding place. It's got to be it, the darkness. Surely the darkness will hide me, and the light will become night around me. We'll seek a place of darkness, finding a place that's devoid of God, a place where darkness has overtaken light and night has surpassed day, a place where evil can shine through, and a place where people love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. But as William MacDonald says, that if a person wanted the darkness to hide from God, he would be trusting a false refuge. Night cannot shut out the presence of the Lord. Or as the psalmist discovers that darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, and the darkness is as light to you. This is an imagery that John, Jesus' disciple, picks up when he writes his gospel. He says that the light has come into the world, that the word has become flesh, and the life of mankind is here for Jesus. And he writes that in him, in Jesus, was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness. The darkness has not overcome it. The light of Christ shines in the darkness. Darkness has been defeated. Night has become day. Darkness has become light. And light reveals all that was hidden in the darkness. And the psalmist discovers that there's no place, that nowhere that they can go where God will not seek them. There's nowhere that God will not look, not to the highest heavens, not to the deepest depths, not to the farthest east or the farthest west, even the deepest darkness. There's no place they will be found where God's Spirit will not find them. No matter how hard they try, no matter how far they flee, no matter how desperately we try to escape, we cannot hide from God. The all-knowing, all-present God is continually seeking after us. It says that God's presence can haunt us. It can be unwelcomed and unwanted. However, there's also great security in it. He is with us, protecting us, loving us, even when we do not want him. The all-present, all-powerful God is continually seeking after us. But why? Why would God want to do that? What's the purpose of that? And the third stanza kind of begins to help us understand that talks about God's power, how God's powerful hand is at work creating us, and that the psalmist knew that because God created us, that's why he was seeking after us. Now, there are other psalms that maybe just capture God's power better. Psalm 19 says that the heavens declare the glory of God, that the skies proclaim his work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal his knowledge. The passage tells about how awesome God's power is, that he creates planets and stars, clusters and galaxies, and all these point to God. But there's something different with humanity, that something special that goes on when God creates us, that God carefully, meticulously, purposefully, lovingly forms each and every one of us. Genesis tells us that God shaped us from the dirt and he breathed life into humanity. This God who spoke the universe into existence, who hung the stars in their place, looked down and said, "Let us make humanity in our image, in our likeness." So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created us. Male and female, he created them. And Psalm 139 echoes what happened in Genesis, saying, "You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I was made in the secret place. I was woven together in the depths of the earth." God, this creator God, creator of the universe, created our inmost beings, our souls, our essence, all of who we are. He knit us together before we were born, carefully crafting us, working on us in the secret place that only the Creator knows. And he formed us into his image. God knit us together in his likeness, male and female, each reflecting his image, woven together by the works of his hand. Each of us, all of us, fearfully and wonderfully made. The omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent God carefully creates us, artfully designing us, filling us with purpose and meaning, and writing out our story. It says that all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Like an author who carefully crafts a novel, God's book is filled with our story. And it's a story of epic adventure, of distress, rescue, redemption, and restoration. It's a story filled with awe and wonder. It's a tale of good triumphing over evil. It's a book to be read, a book to be enjoyed, and a book to be shared. It's not a story of control where God is demanding us to adhere to a certain script, but a story where past, present, and future are realized and true life is discovered. Marionette Subdeacon says that when something is written in a book, it has permanence. It exists not just in the mind of the knower, but forever in the pages of the book. This is the explanation about why God knows the psalmist. Since creation, the psalmist's brain and future was written in God's book. God knows our story. God plans our story. He ordains our story. He has written our story. And in the story, we get to discover the God who is continually seeking after us, who wants what's best for us, who sent his son to die for us, to offer us new life, because God loves his precious children. The psalmist continues saying, "How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast are the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of the sand." Try to wrap your head around this, and it's difficult. God is thinking about you. His vast, innumerable thoughts are continually thinking about you. But here's the truth. They're not thoughts of disappointment and regret. They're not thoughts of anger and frustration. They're not thoughts of what might have been or where things went wrong. His thoughts of you are precious. The author of life, who is gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love, he is continually thinking about you. And he has written out your story, but even more so, he participates in it. Once again, in this psalm, we see the hand of God at work. And this says that your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. The omnipotent hand of God reaches down into the depths of our lives. And he grabs us by the hand and he guides us through life, steering us along the way. And he protects us, keeps us from danger, from ourselves and things around us. I encourage you to look around, read the story of your life, and ask yourself, where did you see the hand of God guiding you? How has God been steering you? Where do you see his hand holding yours? And how do you see the story of amazing grace impacting your life? The all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful, almighty judge has been guiding you and protecting you all the days of your life. And you may think that you're hiding from him, but it's God who hides himself in your story. If you read carefully the story he's written for you, if you diligently study the book of your life, You will discover that God is hidden in the heartaches, the broken pieces, the ruined portions of your life, that God has been knitting together, weaving his grace into the depths of your despair, fearfully and wonderfully making and remaking you. God is continually at work and inviting us into a deeply personal relationship with him. He sent his son to take on our sin and our guilt on the cross. He sends his Holy Spirit to guide us and counsel us and show us the way to live. He offers us a story that's different than the world would write for us. And he invites us to experience that story in relationship with him, in fellowship with others, and in life everlasting. Now, there's a game like hide and go seek, but played a lot in youth ministry. It's called Sardines. Sardines is a game, instead of everyone going out and hiding, one person seeking, one person goes out. That person finds a place to hide. And then the rest of the group goes out and seeks. And when you find that person, you hide with them. And so the seeker becomes the hider and eventually becomes crammed in there like sardines in a can. But if we look at the stories of our lives, we'll see that when we try to hide from God, God is hiding with us, squeezed into the nooks and crannies of our lives, hidden in the extremes and in the in-betweens, revealing his grace, his compassion, his love and mercy for us. The all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful, almighty judge has been playing hide and seek with you your entire life. Mike Yaconelli says, God is more than present with us. He knows us. He doesn't follow alongside us. He follows inside us. We don't have to attend church to find God. We don't have to make sure our life is clear of any sin to find God. God has found us regardless of our situation, regardless of our condition. We can be lost, dizzy by our own spiritual vertigo, but God is present with us, luring us back to himself. We may turn our backs from God, but God is always facing us. Ready or not, here he comes.